before we get going, I'm sure some of you guys want me to comment on Friday's report, but no, I'm not going to do that. My responsibilities to the Buckeyes, my responsibilities to this team, and making sure that we're ready to play in 12 days. And that's where we're going to keep the focus. That being said, Julian Sayin will be the starting quarterback against Texas. It was a close competition. I think both guys, we all feel confident, can win a game for us. I think Julian separated himself really over the last week with his consistent play. I feel like our guys are confident again with both quarterbacks. I think we'll need both quarterbacks. Lincoln did a lot of great things, but we're going to name Julian the starter here, give him the majority of the reps with the ones, and go prepare to beat Texas.
All right, we're going to open up the floor for questions. Dan Hope, 11 Warriors.
Yeah, just following up on that, just what was it about Julian over the last couple of weeks that made the difference ultimately allowed him to win the job?
Well, I think you're always looking for consistency and taking care of the football. And when you start with practice one in the spring and then kind of do, study on the entire, growth over 6 months, you see that there was a lot of growth made. And we look at the numbers and the production. We felt like, he was, in a situation where he was ready to go play in this game. We also feel like Lincoln's ready to play. But, overall, Julian was more consistent.
Pat Murphy, 24/7 Sports.
You mentioned Lincoln and still needing him. We talked about this in the past when we became starters, but how important it is for him to handle this the right way. Obviously, he's been a backup before, but not maybe the primary backup. So what is his role now?
Yeah, he was great in the meeting that we talked about. He's he knows in his heart he's going to play this year. And so he's going to prepare to play in his first game, and we know it's a long season. So, I'm sure he's a competitor. I'm sure he wants to play in the first game, but I wouldn't say he's discouraged. I thought he had a good practice out here today. He had good energy. The team knows that we're going to need him, so and he knows. Again, I thought that was excellent leadership on his end, and it's a long season.
Over here to the right, Adam King, WDNS.
How did Julian take the news, and how did you kind of talk about it with both those guys?
Yeah, met with him quickly this morning and shared with him, the decision. I'll leave most of the conversation between us, but as you can imagine, they'll talk about winning this first game, being the best quarterback room in the country, taking care of the ball, making routine plays routinely. What comes with that. And we got to prepare like heck over the next 12 days to go win a monster game early on. So that's it. And one thing's for sure is we work them hard in practice. And it's our job to make sure that they feel like when they're out there on the practice field, it's as game-like as possible, knowing that that's completely unrealistic in terms of the fans and the crowd, but in terms of the intensity of the practices, what we put on them, the expectations. And there's a reason for that, so that they can go perform in a situation like this. And I share with them when they get in the game, let it rip, go get it, and play with confidence, because that's what all the preparation rewards you with, is the ability to play with confidence.
Over here to the right, Andrew Gillis, Cleveland.com.
Ryan, with Julian, what did you learn about him in this process? Obviously, I'm sure you got an idea coming in, but what did you learn about him as a quarterback and as a leader?
He's smart, poised, has good composure, can see it, has good timing. And has really built command and confidence as time has gone on. And so, as you see the traits, you see the accuracy, you see the ball getting out of his hand quickly. But the ability to run the offense, get us in the right play, make good decisions, throw it away when we need to, and ultimately take care of the football. But he can fit the ball in tight spaces when he needs to. He's got a good feel for the pocket, and so all those things, were areas that we recognized that he's taking steps forward here during the preseason.
Far left, Jared Smalley, WCMH.
Hi, Ryan. Over the weekend, named the block O with a young man who has changed positions here, who has developed here. His relationship with Coach Vic is unique in that development. Can you explain a little bit about why he was a good choice for that role, and then his relationship with Coach Nick and how they have worked together to create this career that he's building?
When we decide to award a player with the block O, it's Coach Mick and the strength staff and myself who voted on it. And this year it was unanimous. And that speaks to Sonny and the work that he's put in the summer, the off season, the leadership that he's shown, the ability to stand in front of his teammates and say hard things. You know, part of being a leader is, you know, being comfortable with conflict. And I've seen him grow in that area. He came in really as a senior in high school his freshman year. And, you know, before his senior year, to come here early, grew, and just got, you know, more and more indoctrinated in the program. And certainly this program runs deep into his family, and it means a lot to him. And so, you know, this is somebody that cares a lot about his teammates, loves Ohio State, loves the Buckeyes, but has become a tremendous leader and obviously an excellent player. And so all those things wrapped into one show you why he deserves that award.
And just to follow up on that, but the way that Nick has prided himself on the development of people,
Yeah.
not just development of physical traits, can you just, I know that's one example, but can you help us understand why he plays such a unique role in making those stories happen?
Yeah, so, you know, our entire program starts, you know, it's our foundation with the weight room and what Nick does in there. The discipline, the leadership, the accountability, discipline, all of those things. And, you know, Nick's been doing it a long time, and he knows that it's very difficult to replicate what happens during the season and what happens during the game in those moments where things get really, really hard and you have to respond. And so he tries to create that as many times as he can and then teach them the lessons along the way because he knows what it looks like. And he's seen it, has tremendous wisdom. And he's just, you know, he's unrelenting. He comes every single day with the same amount of energy. And, you know, if you call him at, you know, 8:30, he's already sleeping because he's going to be out at 4 o'clock. And that's just the way he is. He cares about his players. He cares about his staff. And, you know, he's going to constantly push guys. And the other part of it is, you know, he's a truth teller. You know, we all need truth tellers in our life. And that weight room doesn't lie. The weights don't lie. And so that's why I think, you know, so many guys grow because they get the truth from him. And although they may not always like it, that's how you grow.
Austin Ward.
Ryan, do you think there are any jobs that haven't been settled for next week yet?
Well, I think there are positions where, you know, we've sort of drawn a line where, okay, you know, these guys are going to hit the scout team and have a ways to go to get on the field. And then there's certain positions where we feel like we feel comfortable putting, you know, these players into the game. So, you know, for instance, I think right now we would say that we're probably you know, 6 or 7 guys that we feel comfortable putting in a game on the offensive line. You know, I don't think we fully decided how many reps everybody will play in the O-line, but I think you will see a little bit of a rotation, sort of like you saw at times during the playoff run where guys would, you know, get in there for 15, 20 snaps, take a little bit off of the starter. You know, I think, you know, at running back, you know, we feel comfortable if you play, you know, 3 guys in the game. You know, receiver, you know, that's something that we're still working through. How deep do we feel? You know, there's been times we've had 6 guys we feel comfortable. Some years we've only had 3. Tight end is probably the deepest we've been. Probably feel comfortable with 4 or 5 guys actually going in the game tight end. On defense, you know, I think we feel comfortable with, you know, 3 safeties, you know, a couple nickels, 4 corners. You know, 4 linebackers. You know, I'm going to miss somebody along the way, but that's kind of how we feel, and so we will rotate. The first one is a little different. You know, if it wasn't a game like Texas, you probably would see more rotation. But as we get closer, we'll start to get an idea of how many snaps each guy's going to play.
Far left, Katie Capusta, Spectrum News.
Coach, in years past, maybe 2 years ago, when you were naming a starter, it was kind of you were leaning on 2 quarterbacks. Why is it so important, especially when you're playing a team like Texas, to name a starter now and have that confidence in that quarterback, but also give the team an idea of the leader?
Yeah, I think in a game like this, I mean, you got to prepare. You got to get the reps with the ones. You got to you know, do your best for the first game of the year. And you know, if you are splitting reps, I think that's hard to do because you only have so many times in practice where you can rep a play. And you know, a lot of times you need 3 or 4 reps at the very least in that week of a play to get the different looks, the different coverages, the different leverages, and making sure that you know, receivers can only run so many routes, for example. It's the same thing up front. So each of these reps become valuable as you get closer to the game. As we're further away from the game, not as much. You can roll guys and you can watch guys learn and grow and see how they respond. But as we get closer, those reps become more valuable. So we want to make sure that the guy who started is getting the majority of those reps with the ones. Now that being said, Lincoln has to be ready too, so he will get some reps with the ones. But that's why we made the decision here today.
Cameron T. Robinson, The Athletic.
Ryan, a couple days ago, we talked to Larry, and he mentioned as long as his career has gone on, he's never had a situation like this where he had 4 guys go to the NFL and had to replace that. And go into the offseason, he made some personal and also like technical adjustments with the what he was doing. I'm curious what you've seen different from him and how you feel like that impacted that improvement this offseason.
Well, I was thinking about that because if some of those guys had decided to go to the NFL the year before, some of those guys like Cade and KJ, they still would have to play last year. So, there's still some good experience in that room. But they didn't play as much. They weren't starters, so now they're getting thrust into a role where they are starters. And I think it's been a great challenge for that room, for Larry, and I think you're seeing growth there. The first challenge will be on Saturday, and we'll see where these guys are at and go from there. I think we're going to get great feedback across the team coming out of this first game of where we are. But we are seeing a lot of progress there, and he's doing everything he can to make sure those guys are ready.
Rob Aller, Columbus Dispatch.
Yeah, Will Howard was a transfer. Julian's a transfer. You guys had discussions. Does that enter into the equation at all in terms of who you're going to start, a message that might be sent, versus a guy you recruited straight out of high school? Or is that just football today?
Well, yeah, it's football today. It is, yeah. But in a perfect world, we would love to recruit high school players, develop them in the program for a few years, and then watch them grow and build. But there's no time to play the games or mess around. I mean, you got to win now, and so the best players play, and that's the way we look at it. But as you know, we want to make sure we're recruiting the best players in the country and developing them and retaining them, because that's how you keep a culture in place. But you win games right now by playing the best players. So that's the balance that we need to find.
Dylan Davis, Delaware Gazette.
I asked you coming out of the spring about Tavy and just where Stanley was in the quarterback room, and we talked about the experience and how you can see him like that, or can't see him like that for that matter. Now that you've seen him in some game like reps, scrimmages, and things like that, what kind of progress has he made? And is he even in the conversation for potentially playing in that QB2 role? Did he get to that point this season?
He's not there right now, but he has made progress. I think he knows where his deficiencies are right now, and he's been told those. And I think that's really what this weekend was after the scrimmage. Was people were able to get feedback, figure out what the things they've done well are, what the things they need to work on. He knows what he needs to work on. He has all the traits. He has the tools. We think he can absolutely be the quarterback of our future. But he's got a gap here that he's got to cover, and he's working at it hard. And it's Billy's job and my job and Hart's job to make sure that we're doing everything he needs to grow. But he has the tools. But right now he's the clear third.
Jeremy Birmingham.
All right, go back to January and think about this quarterback competition that was ahead. Has it been harder than you initially thought it would be to get to this point with Julian, and why?
I just think it's been a great competition. If you get around both of these guys, they're both competitive and both talented. Lincoln really has done some great things. I mean, as you guys know, he's a tremendous athlete, and I just think he's only still scratching the surface on what he can be, and so he's going to continue to grow. And I think he knows that. I think when you get around him, you'll feel that. Where if it was a quarterback that had been around football his entire life and he was kind of tapped out, hit his ceiling, he'd be more frustrated. I think he knows he's still got a lot of runway here for his career, and so he's growing and getting better every day. You can see it. Julian has gotten stronger and bigger, which is obviously something he needed to do when he got here, and he's learned the offense and he's playing faster. So again, the good news is we feel good with both of them in the game. And it was good to see them compete. I think we need both of them.
Is there a built-in challenge when it comes to understanding transfer quarterbacks, guys that you recruited Julian, but not all that aggressively because he was with Alabama for a year? So is it harder to understand someone's personality and how they're going to fit maybe than it used to be when somebody you've recruited for years?
Yeah, I think it takes a little longer to get to know them when you've recruited, especially quarterbacks, is so start so early these days that you kind of know them for a few years before they get here. We didn't have that luxury with Julian, but he's been here for over a year, so we got a great handle on him. And he's an easy guy to read, and the same thing with Will. We didn't know him very long, but we got to figure it out pretty quick. Again, it's kind of the way of college football nowadays.
Austin Spencer Holbrook.
Seems like all after preseason we haven't really talked about next. There are a lot of decisions there. It's his first training camp here, and having all really understood, I guess, what kind of what you're just watching on film.
Yeah, really talented, explosive with the balls in his hands, and you saw last year what he did, and so it's been fun to watch that tight end group grow and watch what he can do. I think it's been good for him. I think he would tell you, I don't put words in his mouth, but going through a training camp and a spring ball at Ohio State was different for him. And he's really been pushed in a lot of areas, and he's shown a lot of growth. And he's become a better football player every day. And excited to see him play on Saturday.
Tony Gerben, Buckeye Huddle.
A couple of quick ones. You mentioned 3 running backs, 4 linebackers. Who's that third running back? Is that 4 linebacker?
There you go.
What's the problem situation?
Yeah, Nick's been doing a good job. He really has improved. Got his black stripe off the other day. Joey's been improving too. And so again, those are 2 guys we feel comfortable. Both those guys could kick in the game, could punt the game. So I'll let Rob continue to work on that. But I feel comfortable with both those guys in the game. Joey is the incumbent there. In terms of running backs, I'm going to let Coach Locke kind of handle that. Because once I start going through that, my phone will be buzzing or something like that. So the competition continues, and we'll keep evaluating it. We're still 12 days out, so do some things out there today that we saw that move guys up, move guys down, and it's kind of how it goes in the first week. And when you have a different game like than you have in this one right here, like maybe last year, you go into a game, give a bunch of guys some plays, get a little bit more of an evaluation, and start to evaluate from here. Here we got to make some really, great assumptions, and then let them go play and evaluate it. We're going to get some real strong feedback coming out of it. So, but I'll tell you this: our guys are fired up about this first one, man. Like, it's edgy out there, it's competitive. They're fired up, and this game's coming fast, and our guys will be ready.
Joe Reedy, Associated Press.
Brian, in terms of last year with Will and Adam, in terms of this year's quarterback competition, anything you learned from that last year that you applied to the competition this time?
No, not as much last year, just because Will was so much more experienced than an older guy. These guys are younger, so I put them more into the guys that we had who were into year 2 or were in their first year starting, and then how that's going to go. Because once they get on the field, it's not a finished product. There's a lot of stories that we think about C.J. Stroud and kind of where he had the Minnesota game and the Oregon game, and then kind of built from there as the season went on. And when you have a young quarterback, there's different things you got to work through. So I think more about maybe those than I do Will.
And then just as a follow-up, how much of this week is still honing stuff for preseason before you get into kind of full-on Texas product?
Yep, it's been install up until Saturday, and then we start turning the corner here towards Texas.
Doug Labreeze.
Ryan, how the different types of quarterbacks that you've had at Ohio State, how has that affected your view of maybe what you are looking for ideally in a quarterback? And does sort of like the traits and style of play affect the competition or not?
Yeah, it does. We obviously want somebody who can pass the ball and has innate accuracy. That's certainly something that has to happen. When you go from there, there's a lot of things that guys come with different skill sets, and I think when you look at the guys we've had, from JT to Dwayne, Joe, you had CJ and Justin, you had Kyle, you had Will, and now we have Julian and Lincoln. They're all kind of different styles, but I think what they all shared in common is that they were accurate throwing the ball. They were all smart, good leaders. The size, the quickness, the arm strength, the athleticism, I think that all different, but we can tailor it based on what they can do.
And Lincoln's athleticism that you mentioned, can that help you in
Yes.
a situation, in a package, to be on the field in any way?
Sure. Yep.
Bill Landis.
Right. When a young quarterback can kind of see the picture, the way you were saying about Julian a few minutes ago, how much does that expedite the development process process, and can you maybe contextualize about how he is in that area compared to some other quarterbacks?
Yeah, I think he sees it, but, I've learned that, when you're talking about players, it's like the difference between a professional and a player. A professional is remembering things. A player is learning because they haven't seen that look before. And I think if you look at just even in college football, the guys who have probably had the most success, if you're just looking at trends, are the guys that have been in college game for 4 and 5 years. You look at, Penix, you look at Will, you look at Stetson Bennett, you look at Bo Nix, and you start going through the list of guys, they're guys who have been in college football for several years. Why? Because they're remembering those plays. I think the guys who go on to the NFL that do well are typically, a little bit older because they played some. I think that goes back to the conversation of, when as a quarterback are you actually playing the game of football? These guys nowadays, they'll play some 7-on-7, they'll throw routes on air, but maybe they're only playing anywhere from 10 to 12, maybe some states 14 games a year. And of those games, how many passes are you actually throwing? So when you start to look at it like that, there's not a lot of reps to be had. So these guys are learning over and over again. And then depending on what style of play they played in high school, does it translate to college? What was their supporting cast? There's a lot of things that come into play. So all of those reps are important so that they're actually, when they make a mistake, they're learning, then they can remember that play. Okay, I got this coverage on this play, and now I can go play. As opposed to, okay, and now I'm learning that against this coverage and on this route or against this protection, I need to do this. And there's a lot that comes with playing quarterback. But there's certain things that players can see. They can anticipate spatial awareness, body language. They have anticipation on where routes are going to be. They can read body language and things like that. So if it was that easy, I think NFL clubs would have a lot easier time drafting these guys. We're trying to figure them out when they're in high school. NFL teams are trying to figure them out, when they're 22 and 23 years old. So it's not a perfect science, and that's a long answer, but I think there's a lot that goes with it in that growth.
Stefan Kreisning, Cleveland.com.
Kind of following up on that, with your track record at Ohio State, Will was kind of the anomaly in terms of veteran who comes in transfers. What do you enjoy about the process of getting a guy from high school, Julian to start here, he was a week in college when he got here, what do you enjoy about the process of taking a raw talent like that and turning him into starting quarterback that's going to face Texas week 1?
Yeah, it's a at times frustrating process, but it is rewarding. You see them come up the back end. I think about Dwayne in the Maryland game where he ran for 3 touchdowns. I think about Justin in that Clemson game. I think about CJ in the Georgia game. And as you bring these guys along, you're like, now they got it. Now they're ready. And along the way, you try to help them because they don't know what they don't know, and you try to counsel them the best you can. It's like raising the son, and you bring them along. It's like that at any position. I think that you'd see that with our coaches at every position in Ohio State. But I think it's different at quarterback because there's so much expectation and there's so much on their plate, and there's obviously a lot of attention that's given to them. So that's another part. He talks about conversations with the quarterbacks that when you come in and you're a recruit here, you have to realize what comes with it, the good and the not so good.
Andy Anders, 11 Warriors.
Just following up on the offensive line, you said 6 or 7 guys. Is there a defined starting 5 or are those?
We feel like there's 5 that we're going to go with here, and then I feel like there's 2 or 3 other guys that we can put in and rotate. I won't get into that right now. As we get closer, we'll see. But those guys are grinding and they're working. I think all 3 O-line coaches are doing a great job. I think there's good leadership there, but they need to play well in this first game, take some pressure off of the quarterback.
Joe Nugent, WCMH.
No doubt Brandon Innes has made a lot of big plays for this team, but what does it say about him being captain without officially starting?
Well, it just has a strong personality. I like the way that he encourages his teammates. If you watch him last year, when Carnell, I have pictures in my head of when Carnell Tate caught that double move against Northwestern and Wrigley. I remember watching him run down the field on the 3rd and Jeremiah. He's the first guy chasing down a play because he's just a great teammate. He encourages his teammates. Well, with his work ethic now has, now he's into, year 3 here, and his body of work is starting to speak for itself. So he's not only a great teammate, but now he's become an excellent player. And when things got a little dicey in camp, he was the guy that spoke up. He was the guy that challenged everybody. And because of the work he put in and how much he cares his teammates sat up and listened and responded. That's the other thing. It's one thing to say something. It's another thing to watch him respond. He did that multiple times during camp. Brought the whole offense together and got them fired up and got them moving. And that took a big step. That probably had an impact on him being voted captain.
Bill Rabinowitz, Columbus Dispatch.
Do you have a leader or decision safety?
A leader at safety? Yeah, two leaders. I think they're both ready to play. I think they're both doing well. I like what they, we tackled again, a decent amount here in the preseason, and I felt like they're playing faster. I think they do, being with Caleb, they do play faster. There's a certain level of confidence when you see two back there. I think that's good. Also, Leroy has stepped up. Fahim has stepped up. So those guys are going to have to give us snaps as well.
You had said last week when it was, Austin's going to definitely be left tackle or this way out.
Yeah, you guys keep asking these questions. All right, mercy. Yeah, Austin will be the left tackle. But that's it. You guys aren't getting anymore.
Joey Kaufman, Columbus Dispatch.
Right, this is with Julian, this is the first time in a couple of years we've had a starter going into this August, September, starting to be, leaving kind of 23 and then starting next. What is reasonable for people and expectations, just because you can see
Yeah.
not dragging it. So just what is expectations properly and sort of change the girl.
Just win, baby. That's it, man. Just win. Find a way to win. One more point than that. If it's 14-13 or 65-64, we got to find a way to win. That's it. That's all that matters. And we're not gonna worry about the what ifs and all that other stuff. We're gonna let it fly. And I said that to him today, and I said the same thing to Lynn. We're gonna let this thing go. And we're in the game, and that's it. And we're not gonna worry about all the other stuff because we know they have the expectations. The expectations win every game. But in this game, find a way to go 1-0 on Saturday night. That's it. And we'll go from there.
Got time for just a few more. Tim May.
You've done this a million times, Ryan. I'm gonna go through it again. When did it become apparent to you that Julian was the guy, and then did you spend a couple of days reinforcing that in your mind? Because ultimately, the head coach does make that final decision. You got all that input and stuff. We're like a test, that I'm going to see how he does on this particular play or this particular series, and he went from there.
It wasn't that. It was about a week ago, though. I just started to see some throws and some anticipation. There was a couple reps where the rush was getting to him. In those moments, you have to make quick decisions. And you just throw it to the other team, not good. If you either throw it away or find a way to put it in the spot, even if it's a check down or something like that. I saw some of those things going on, making the routine plays routinely. I also saw command in the huddle. Again, not that I didn't see some of those things with Lincoln, but you're asking about Julian in particular. Saw those things and started to feel like, okay, we can win this guy.
Yeah, and he's not just a quick release guy, like you said. He's got savvy about him. Would you describe him?
Yeah, and he's good at it. I mean, he moves quick. These guys that we saw last year, he got out of the pocket and scrambled during one of the games he was in. So he's got that in him, and he's worked hard in the offseason to change his body.
Stephen Means, Cleveland.com.
This is not the first time that you've had a young quarterback going into a marquee game, but you've at least had some level of build-up going into that marquee game. How does that work your nerves? How is it maybe that you got to put together an offensive game plan, how much you want to put on his plate versus maybe allow the weapons to work for him? How much, what's the thought process going into your head? You don't necessarily have games to get to know him.
That's why we practice so hard, is to get an idea of that, and then we're going to work through those things. But like I said before, the offensive line's got to help them. They got to protect well in this game. They got to block well. The receiver's got to help. The good news, he's got a great supporting cast around him, and we got to make sure that we're keeping it clean for him and get him into a rhythm, and then he can go play. But You're gonna hear me on a broken record. We gotta make those routine plays, routine, keep us on schedule, and then really play well in the situations, and that's it. I mean, yeah, we can sit around and talk about all the what ifs, but like, let's go. And we put a lot of work into this thing. Think about all the different practices we've had. Like, now we go put it on the field and let it rip. And you got to trust your training when you're out there. Like, that's the reward for all the preparation and training is that you can go play with confidence. It's like when you walk into a test. You know, if you haven't put the preparation in, you're nervous. If you know what's going on, then you walk right into that test and go. And so that's what we're going to do, and that's what he needs to do. And all he needs to do is just do what he's been doing. You know, we've talked a lot about, you know, that whole, you know, Roy Hobbs myth, and like, you just need to be you. You know, you're going to sink to the level of your training. And so, you know, I think that he knows that the team has confidence, the coaches have confidence in him. So go let it rip. And you know, I think I shared with him, you know, when I was in that situation where I was competing for a starting job, and then you know, I won the job. I was like, okay, I was able to kind of put it in the next gear now because the coaches, the team believed that I could go win that game. And, you know, we're counting on that to give him a little juice here going in this first one.
Just to use CJ maybe as an example, that didn't necessarily always look good the first couple of weeks. Did you have to develop a level of patience as he worked through his own things, and can you maybe apply that here if it doesn't look like the best possible version of Julian Sayin?
Yeah, and that's part of the growth, and that's part of being at Ohio State. You know, I don't know if anybody after that Oregon game, I saw it 300 or 400 yards, and I'm like, ooh, we got a special one, and they were ready to run them out of town. You know, like, and so that's part of being a coach and counseling these young men is like, hey, like, okay, here's what we know, here's what we see. You got to trust the process on this thing. That's what it's all about, and then just keep growing. It's gonna be a long season, you know. And I said this to the team before. You know, every season, each team has their own story to write. You know, last year's story's been written, and you know, here we go. We'll have to start the new one. And you just don't know where it's gonna go. It's gonna be a long journey, but we got to stick together, and it's gonna be about the brotherhood like it always is.
Dave Holmes, WSYX.
Yeah, I think the perception amongst fans is that this is by far the biggest, most stressful decision, quarterback, and certainly the ramifications are. But as a head coach, you have 100 things to be stressed about. Was this number one in the front of your mind the most stressful thing for you, or are there other things that you were actually more worried about than making this decision?
I mean, there's so many things that go into getting ready for this first one, but yeah, I mean, quarterback, as you know, is you know, right at the top of the list. But there's more to it than just that, and it's everything. You know, when you start to put your attention too much towards one thing, you know, another problem come up. So, no, I mean, but we've known this has been important. But again, I feel good. There's two guys that we can put in the game and play. There's been times you think about when we had Justin that 1 year, you know, we didn't have, you know, quality backups. I mean, they were good guys and everything. They're great for the program. Thank God we had them. But they weren't like, you know, excuse me, we had like two guys right there. And so that part's been good. But again, when you have guys who haven't done it before, certainly, you know, there's an unknown there. But we know we see in practice, and our guys believe in them. And both guys had a good practice today.
Nicole Shear.
Coach, you always talk about, you know, the need to grow up, and leadership obviously being a huge part of the game. These two guys learn from a guy like Will Howard, but you've said they don't need to be Will, they need to be their own kind of leader. How have you seen Julian specifically develop as a leader and really grow in that area, and maybe how do you want to see him to continue to grow in that area?
Yeah, I think just when you're in the huddle, you have an opportunity to look those 10 guys in the eye and take command. Not only show that you know what you're doing, but to encourage them. When you're in a no-huddle situation, it's a lot different. Guys are 20, 30 yards away, the line's up there looking at the defense, and so you don't have as many of those opportunities. I think, you know, since we decided to huddle, it's really allowed the quarterback to take more of that leadership role. He saw that, and I think both of these quarterbacks have done a nice job of walking into that huddle and grabbing command. And when you call a play, you break that huddle first, you get up the line of scrimmage, like there's something about that. And you know, we need to continue to do that and talk to these guys when we get these moments. You know, let's go short yardage, man. We got to find a way. You know, we got to knock the line of scrimmage back. Running back's got to get downhill. The red zone, the third down. You know, there's all these different things where now he gets in there, he can communicate that. And with the coach player communication, we can give him some of those little things to, you know, infuse into the huddle, which I think goes a long way. So I thought Will was really good at that. I thought Will was also extremely positive. I see Julian being the same way. I see Lincoln being the same way. And so now we got to go play.
Last two questions. Steve Hellwagen.
Hey, Coach, you talked about the leadership by Styles and Ennis.
Yep.
The other two guys, Downs, we know, is an All-American. in Cerebell, what did they do to raise their level of leadership to build the right where they go to this gap?
I think it goes back to making the weight room. We did this about, I guess, 3 years ago now, going on 3 or 4 years. Coming off of the end of the season, we bring in leadership. Well, first off, we vote on leaders. I think I've talked about this before. We bring in the team, we explain what a leader is. Sometimes I think we assume these guys know what being a leader is. We explain what it is, and then we vote on it. And we vote guys in based on their position, based on their class, and we usually get about 20 to 24 guys. We then break the guys up into squads, and then through the mixed weight room program, these guys are put in leadership roles. If you're on a squad and somebody's late, the whole team, has to, it's out of the locker room for a week, for example, has to do community service or things like this. And then there's competitions within the squads. After spring's over, we revote again. Some guys are actually taken off the leadership, some guys are brought onto the leadership committee. And then we go into the captains. And I think by the time you get to the captain's vote, the team has seen these guys in leadership roles. They've seen them in the good, they've seen them in the courage, and they've also seen them in tough spots. And I think all of those guys have grown from that and earned the respect of their teammates. And then we talk a lot about building trust. And I think all these guys have done that through their character, who they are, their connections, spending time with people, their confidence, because that's a big part of football. Like, it's one thing to say all those things, but you actually got to do your job, and then consistency. So I think our team trusts those guys because they've seen them in those situations.
Coach, thank you very much.
All right, guys, thanks.